The title of the teaching today is Pilgrim's Progress. Ella had asked us to answer some questions, and one of them, I guess, was where are we and where are we going? Maybe this will answer that. A lot of this is just recapping what we studied earlier and some things that we've studied along the way. But I think what we'll arrive at is Sukkot, which is where we are. The question is, where are we now? In order to reach Sukkot, though, with the ability to walk in the consuming fire, like we read in Yeshayahu 33 yesterday, is an ability to be burned without burning up. Something has to be burned up before we're refined that way, and I think that something is flesh. It's the lusts and the desires of the flesh, and that's a theme repeated over and over throughout the Brit Chadashah. Why is it important to burn up the flesh? Well, the passage that we read earlier says that what is left over from the flesh of sacrifice on the third day shall be burned with fire. There should be no flesh left over on the third day, because why? Because the third day is the day of the Lord. It's the day of resurrection. It is the day when we will have a resurrected body. What use is corrupted flesh to a resurrected, transformed, transfigured body? Those evil desires need to be burned up, and that's what it said in the passage we read in Vayikra. So if any of the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offering should ever be eaten on the third day, he who offers it will not be accepted, and it will not be reckoned to his benefit. It shall be an offensive thing, and the person who eats of it will bear his own iniquity. We can't depend on Messiah to bear our iniquity if we have not allowed that flesh to be consumed by the third day. In other words, right now he's winking at our maturity process. He's watching us as we progress from Pesach to Shavuot to Sukkot. But you cannot make that journey in a day. You would wear yourself out. A nursing child can't make a 3-day journey in one day. So right now he's winking at our infancy. He's nurturing us. He's taking care of us. But once we arrive at the third day, the third pilgrimage, Sukkot, we're going to have to be grown-ups, or we will be consumed in the fire instead of being like the bush that was not consumed by the fire. And he said, you're going to have to bear your own iniquity. If you've left the flesh over, then it's up to you to take care of it. And I don't even want to imagine what that must be. But we know that Shavuot is where we offer the first fruits of the barley, right? It's poor man's bread. And we've talked about who the poor are, who the poor in the kingdom are, the people that need to be given the riches of the kingdom. And we enter poor in the kingdom. See, at Passover, we're all poor men. We're slaves. We have nothing of our own. All we have is grace, basically. We have a little bit of faith and a lot of grace, and we apply that blood of the Lamb to the doorpost. But we're still poor. In fact, what we're going to have to do is ask the Egyptians for their stuff. I believe that was a token when they were able to extract silver and gold things, precious things from the Egyptians. I think that was a foretaste of Sukkot. Their refining process when they would come through as pure gold. It's like when you betroth a wife, at that time you give her gifts as a token of your intention to follow through on the covenant. that yes, there will be a document that we both sign. It will be a contract. It will be a covenant between us. And these gifts are a token of my affection until the time that this marriage is consummated. Same way that Eliezer took gifts to Rivka. So at Pesach, even though we are young, in good faith, he gives us good gifts. And I think that was what the Egyptians were giving to the Israelites. But that does not mean that we are really that rich. It's a token. It's a foretaste. It's not the riches of the kingdom. It's the spoils, basically, of a spoiled kingdom. But we've got about 3 years, as we've learned. We've got about 2 to 3 years for a nursing period where we drink the milk of the Torah, and we grow to a level of maturity in that 3 years. And I think what we're doing between Pesach and Shavuot is spending that 3 years, figuratively, growing up a little bit. You know, unleavened bread follows Pesach first fruits. We're learning to burn a little bit of the flesh. You know, a child doesn't learn to give up all the flesh immediately. He might just learn to eat 3 meals a day instead of every time he cries. That's burning up a little bit of flesh. But that's nothing compared to the flesh that you have to burn off as a teenager or a 20-year-old or 30-year-old or 40-year-old. Most of us are still burning flesh as fast as we can. So for about 3 years, remember the tree is to be considered uncircumcised for 3 years. A tree represents a man. What does that mean? We're kind of overlooked. A lot of our transgressions are overlooked for about 3 years as we mature. We are learning in Sarah's tent during that time. But that poor man's bread, that barley bread, has to be burned up during that period, because at Shavuot, what we're going to offer is a new kind of wheat, a new kind of grain. It's not the poor man's bread, which is barley, but it's wheat. It's the finest. It's what the rich and the wealthy in the kingdom eat. That's when we come at Shavuot, we bring the first fruits of the wheat, not the fullness of the wheat. That won't come in until later. But the first fruit, the choicest of the wheat, is offered at that time. And so as we are offering up the beginning of the riches of the kingdom, at Shavuot, we show that we've reached a new level of burning up the flesh. Something even more precious now is going to be burned up. It might be those strongholds that are in our lives that are really firmly entrenched. It might even be secret strongholds. Most of us have secret strongholds. People may not even know about them. It might be thought patterns. Who knows what it is? But I think he will begin to reveal those deep-rooted things that take some maturity to uproot. And we'll begin to burn those up at Shavuot. All that should be left once we arrive at Sukkot should be living Torah. Like the resurrected Yeshua, like we were just talking about. He had a physical body. He ate broiled fish. He ate honeycomb. He said, touch me. You can handle me. I'm right here. I'm not a spirit. Yes, I might appear and disappear whenever I want to, but this is still a transfigured, transformed, resurrected body of flesh that you're seeing. I think that's what we will receive at Sukkot, because that's all that's going to endure until that time, those refining fires. That's how you become a fire walker, by burning up the evil part that is inside of you, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that's mixed into you. He's going to burn that stuff out, and the flesh that is left is what will endure the fire. Now, what I want to look at are some people in Scripture who tried to circumvent that maturity process. In other words, they went from Passover to Sukkot instead of going from Passover to Shavuot to Sukkot. We were just talking about the stars and their courses. The Levites had courses. Everything has a set order. Elohim said, this is my set order of my festivals. These are my feasts. You have 3 pilgrimage festivals that you must appear before me. And he didn't say they are Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuot. He said they are, in their courses, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. What happens when we short circuit that and try to travel directly to Sukkot? Well, if we'll go to Genesis 4, Bereshit 4, verse 3, I'm going to read through verse 7, just to refresh your memory. And it came to be in the course of time that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to Adonai. And Havel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And Adonai looked to Havel and his offering, but he did not look to Cain and his offering, and Cain was very wroth, and his face fell. And Adonai said to Cain, Why are you wroth, and why is your face fallen? If you do well, is there not acceptance? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should master it. And we've talked about when you read that passage in Hebrew, it doesn't say course of time, although that's okay for English. If you read it in Hebrew, it says literally starting from the end of days. And then if you go back into the lexicon, it's alluding to the end of the hot days of summer. What pilgrimage festival occurs at the end of the hot days of the summer? Sukkot. This is when you bring a tithe or your firstborn. All these things that are commanded, you collect those up from the year and you carry them with you to Sukkot. You carry the best fruits of the ground, or you might bring the firstlings of your flock, a really prime lamb or ox, whatever it might be that you're going to present to the Levites in the temple. So we can see that from the beginning, Bereshit, Miketz Yamim, Cain and Havel celebrated the festival of Sukkot. And we know that the problem was not with Havel's offering of produce, because produce is one of the required offerings at Sukkot. You bring the first fruits of the ground. So the problem was not with the offering itself, that he didn't bring blood. Blood is okay too. You can bring the firstborn of your flocks, a tithe of your flocks. His problem was he didn't bring the first fruits. It says he brought of the fruits, and he kept the best for himself. See, at Shavuot, what we learn is we can no longer keep the best for ourselves, that we have to begin to give up the firstborn, the choicest parts of ourselves, those things we've held on to because they were so dear. You probably didn't hold on to those sins because you didn't care about them. You held on to those sins because it was something so dear to your heart and so close to you that you just couldn't let go of yourself in that area. But that might be the choicest part that you have failed to give up. It might be a firstborn. It might be prime fruit in your life that you have kept for yourself, when that is what he requires from you, is the best fruit that you have to offer. And that sin that has beset you has kept you from bringing freely that first fruit offering of yourself. So the problem obviously was not with what he brought, except that it wasn't the best. And we have to offer the sacrifice of our own soul to be burned on that altar. So that is one place where we can see that the end was declared from the beginning as it applies to first fruits. That was a prophecy. What could it mean? Well, it meant a lot of stuff, but first thing it means is for us to begin to look for the end at the beginning in Bereshit. So let's do that. In Bereshit 28, this is a very interesting case where Shavuot was bypassed and someone went directly to Sukkot, and man, did it cause trouble. Bereshit 28, verse 16. Here's a vow. Remember, Yaakov has been pretty much run off from his father's house. And of course, he's on the run. He's not really even sure about this place where he's going. He's never been there before. And he puts his head down on this rock, on a mountain, and he has a vision in his sleep. And when he awakes, in verse 16, he makes a vow to Elohim. And Yaakov awoke from his sleep and said, "Truly, the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." And he was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of Elohim, and this is the gate of the heavens." And Yaakov rose early in the morning and took the stone that he had put at his head and set it up as a standing column and poured oil on top of it. And he called the name of that place Beit El, or the house of God. However, the name of that city had been Luz previously, and we know that that was actually the site of the temple later on. And Yaakov made a vow, saying, "Seeing Elohim is with me and has kept me in this way that I am going, and has given me bread to eat and a garment to put on, when I have returned to my father's house in peace, and Elohim has been my Elohim, then this stone which I have set as a standing column shall be Elohim's house. And of all that you give me, I shall certainly give a tenth to you." The same way that Cain and Abel brought a tithe, either of the flock or of the fruit of the ground, Yaakov says, in this place, if you will bless me, if you will keep me, I will bring a tithe of my flocks and my herds and everything you have given me to you in this place. I will erect an altar. Until now, I'm setting this stone here. I'm pouring oil over it to seal my vow to you. I promise you, the first thing I will do when I can return to this land in peace to my father, that I will come to you in this place and I will make this your house. I will worship you in this place. What does Torah say about a vow? It's better to do what than to break it? Better not to vow. But he makes a vow. Now, if we flip on over to when he does actually return, I think this is verse, 33. Genesis 33. Let's pick up about verse 13. Remember, he's met Esau and the big meeting is over. Esau is not angry anymore. They reconcile. Everything appears to be okay. He has been allowed to return to his father's land in peace. So Elohim has kept his part of the bargain, right? Everybody has survived. And Esau says, come on, let's go. Let's depart and go, and I'll go before you. I'll be your protection for all your wives and your children and your flocks and herds and all this. But in verse 13, Yaakov responds and he says, my master knows that the children are weak, and the flocks and the herds which are nursing are with me. And if the men should drive them hard one day, all the flocks shall die. Please let my master go on before his servant, and let me lead on slowly according to the pace of the livestock that go before me, and according to the pace of the children, until I come to my master in Seir. See, that's interesting. He knows that those children can only move so fast. And he says, if we try to reach the final destination in one day's journey, it will kill them. They can't make it. The livestock and the nursing children will not make that journey in one day. And Esau said, please let me leave with you some of the people who are with me. But he said, why this? Let me find favor in the eyes of my master. And Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. And Yaakov set out to Sukkot. Now see, that's a problem. Because he had made a vow, if you bring me here in peace, then I will come back and I will worship you here. I will make this the house of God, this awesome place, this gate to heaven. Instead, Yaakov set out to Sukkot. He takes off and he goes straight to Sukkot and built himself a house. Didn't he just vow to build the house of God in that place? Instead, he goes to Sukkot and he made booths for his livestock. And that is why the name of the place is called Sukkot. And Yaakov came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he had come from Padan Aram. And he pitched his tent before the city. That's interesting. It just said he built a house, and now it says he's pitching a tent. There must be something more there. Maybe we'll find out when we get that part of the Torah portion. And he bought a portion of the field where he had pitched his tent from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 kesitah. And he set up an altar there and called it El Elohei Yisrael. Oops. He didn't keep his vow. He didn't go back to the place. He circumvented the true house of God, and he went straight to Sukkot, pitched tents, built a house, and he buys a portion of a field from a jackass. Chamor is a jackass. It's a male donkey. And that's going to be a symbol of Sukkot from now on. I'll show you that in just a second. The donkey will symbolize Sukkot. But Yaakov is about to bring great trouble upon himself, because if we were to read further, we would find out that this is the place where Shechem raped Dinah. Then he's got two boys that decide to take, vengeance is theirs, saith Levi. They go in, they talk them into being circumcised, and then while they're a little under the weather, they go in and they have a great slaughter, and Jacob says, "What have you boys done to me? You have made me odious in this land. You have caused me trouble. You have caused me Jacob's trouble because of your tempers, because of what you've done." But it originated in Yaakov's breaking his promise to go back to the house of God and build an altar there. See, it was in that place that Abraham told Yitzhak that El Shaddai will provide for himself a ram. There will be a lamb offered up in this very spot. This is where the disciples were tarrying, in the house, the temple, when that fire, that consuming fire came down, and we know that that fire did not consume them. Instead, it empowered them because they had been purified to a point that they could walk with fire. The tongues of the fire. The right thing for Yaakov to have done would have been to return to Beit El, the house of God, Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount, and to allow those nursing children to be strengthened and refined in the fires of Shavuot, so that they too would tarry in Yerushalayim until the Holy Spirit had come to empower them to travel further to Sukkot. They were out of their league. They were not mature enough to camp at Sukkot at that time. One, what was hindering Yaakov's obedience? Well, we can't say it was somebody else's fault. But your wife makes a huge impact on your choices. We know that Yitzhak, he could not have had any better wife chosen for him to balance him, because she actually steps up and, keeps him from making a crucial error and blessing the wrong child. But in Yaakov's case, what he has is two wives, which is number one, out of balance, and then two more handmaids. It's we are not one, we are five. So he's already got a problem. But if you look at their names, it gives you a clue what's going on. Leah, it says, had weak eyes. What do the eyes denote? The ability to see prophetically. Leah is grounded in the physical realm. She cannot see prophetically, because it was Rivka's prophetic vision that salvaged the covenant in her generation. Leah's eyes are weak. So she's going to have trouble enabling Yaakov in that area to be able to lift his eyes and see beyond the physical situation for right now. On the other hand, and remember, she was not loved. She wasn't hated. She just wasn't loved as much as Rachel. And Rachel, we know, was very jealous of Leah, and Leah troubled Rachel. I mean, it was Ephraim and Judah all over again. It was just constant conflict. And Rachel, her name means ewe lamb, a little girl lamb. What does that mean? Well, if we look at her behavior, I think what it means is she has not matured either. She's still a little Passover lamb. She has not been able to mature, travel to Shavuot, in order that she could lead her family to Sukkot. Remember, she was the one that took the household idols. She's still stuck in that salvation place where we're not yet willing to let go of the gods of our fathers. You have to turn loose of that idolatry if you truly want to arrive at Shavuot. Because there is a period of unleavened bread in there you must deal with. You must purge out that leaven, that sin. You must look for it diligently with a candle in order to identify where it is. And so Rachel has not diligently rooted out that love of idolatry that she's still clinging to secretly. See, that's why I'm saying, at Shavuot we might have to deal with secret sins. She's not only hiding these idols from Lavan, she's hiding them from Yaakov. And so unwittingly, he pronounces this curse. Well, whoever's got them, let them die. He's just cursed his own wife to death. In essence, she has cursed herself to death by holding to the idolatry. She's holding on to the pagan ways instead of the one way. You have to let go of the many ways in order to embrace the one. And so, like a lot of believers who stop at Passover in their immaturity, and one thing you'll hear them say over and over if you try to talk to them with any degree of depth in the Scriptures, because they refuse to get into the Torah and truly study the Word of God, what they'll repeat to you when you get them, stymied, they will say, well, all that really matters is the blood. Have y'all ever heard that? I've heard it a lot. Just the blood of Jesus, that's all that matters. Well, it matters, but that was at Passover. Are you going to stay in Passover for 30 years? Or do you think it might be time to move on and realize what's beyond that door where the blood has been painted? Because He's leading you out. He's leading you somewhere. He's not wanting you to stay in that house because it's in a land of idolatry. Realizing what she's done, and I'm sure Yaakov realized what he had done, Rachel dies prematurely. Because if you don't continue in this Torah, you will die, not just a physical death, but a spiritual death will take place way too soon. You will pass away before your time. The more you come into this, the more life you have. Isn't that true? The more you find out about this Word, the more life you feel inside of you, the more you're rejuvenated, the faster you can regenerate once you've fallen, once somebody smacked you around a little bit. You find out you can jump up a lot faster now than you ever did before. You don't have to lay around and wallow in depression because you've got the life of the Word in you. You're just like one of those cartoon characters. They get flattened by the steamroller and they jump right back up because there's life in the Word. But this curse that this immature little ewe lamb, this little Passover lamb has brought upon herself causes that premature death, and she names the poor kid son of my suffering. Yaakov knows it's really his fault because that family he had not brought to maturity. He had not taken them to Shavuot as he had vowed. He let them stick around Passover, and even though he buried those idols under a tree, the curse had still been pronounced, and she suffered and she died. Now Yaakov knows, he's like, oh, maybe now I can see prophetically, and he changes the name to Benjamin, son of my right hand, because these sons of suffering, when Messiah comes, will be restored to sons of the right hand. And we saw that through Nineveh and studying at Yom Kippur. One little action, though, circumventing Shavuot to go to Sukkot, has caused Jacob a lot of trouble. Unless we think that somehow we've improved upon that, look at the Roman Church. Almost immediately after the first generation of disciples passed away, they began to move the house of God away from Jerusalem, the place, the house of God. They moved and built a house in Rome, not where they had received. They moved the house. They moved it to the seat of sun worship. And they began to mix it like Rachel with the idolatry of the sun god. And they began to celebrate the birthday of the Messiah, who, Rabbi Weiss said, most certainly Elohim would not want his son identified with December 25th. That is the very day they choose to merge with those family idols. And they call it Christmas. And I want you to think, we're not supposed to make graven-formed images of God. But at Christmas time, one image you are going to see over and over and over, whether it's television, walking by a storefront, in your friends' houses, in your family's houses. Their household God is contained in Sukkot. It's in a little sukkah, a little manger scene that's built, a little booth, a little stable. And you've got poor little Yeshua, the perpetual nursing child, never grown up, a little baby. You've got his parents looking on, little images of them. You've usually got a little cow looking on. You've got a sheep, maybe a little ewe lamb looking on. And guess what else you have watching every time? Even the live manger scene, you'll see a jackass every single time looking at the little baby Jesus in the manger, camped at Sukkot and never allowed to grow up. But you know what they're showing you? Yeshua did grow up. They didn't. They keep that idol, that icon, because it symbolizes their own immaturity. The fact that they have never moved past the blood of the Lamb to go to Shavuot, become mature, so that they are ready to enter the kingdom of the Messiah at Sukkot as a grown-up, with the flesh burned away. How come the church never celebrates Shavuot to the same degree it does Christmas? If it's truly all about Jesus, and he thought it was very important that his disciples tarry in Jerusalem until the day of Pentecost, the day of Shavuot, before they were commissioned to go out, why isn't that a huge holiday that we observe? I don't know. The perpetual childhood. We don't want to grow up. We want to be Peter Pan. The next incident where Passover led directly to Sukkot is going to be in Exodus 12. And I think we'll find maybe that this is a good example of where it was okay just for a season there, just for a short time. Exodus 12, 37 and 38. If he declares the end from the beginning, then even at Passover, you're at least going to get a foretaste of Sukkot. It doesn't mean you have permission never to travel through Shavuot, because we know the Israelites did, didn't they? They passed through Shavuot before they reached Sukkot. But they had a foretaste at the very beginning. As Moshe is leading them out in chapter 12, verse 37 of Shemot, it says, "And the children of Israel set out from Ramesses to Sukkot, about 600,000 men on foot, besides the little ones." Ooh, there's our little ones again. They can't move very fast. And a mixed multitude went up with them, too, also flocks and herds, very much livestock. Very much livestock. Okay, there's our donkeys and sheep and cows and so forth. We can see those images again. But I think this is a good example of traveling to Sukkot, because if we were to read a little bit more in that passage, we would find out that the reason he didn't lead them directly into the land of the Philistines is because they were too immature. They were too young. They were like little nursing children. They're fresh out of Passover. You know, they've not even probably completed their days of unleavened bread. I didn't read it that closely this morning. But how could he send them to war, which is for a grown-up, immediately after Passover? He had to nurse them a little bit. So he lets them camp out at Sukkot immediately after leading them out of a place called Ramesses. Now, I looked up Ramses in the concordance, and it doesn't have a Hebrew meaning. There's nothing there, because it's of Egyptian derivative. But when I looked at the word without the vowels, I could see two very distinct Hebrew words. This is Ramesses as it's spelled in Scripture. Okay, that's 7486 in your concordance. The first word I saw was ra'am, which means thunder. If you look at the first 3 letters of the word, you can see it. It's ra'am, thunder. Now, ra'ama, if you add the feminine ending to it, remember when we studied Job and Esau, and how Esau was the horse that is mentioned in Job, and the question that was asked to Job is, hast thou given the horse strength? Hast thou clothed his mane in thunder? Well, I've got thunder, I've got the mane of a horse, and the way, you see the last 2 letters here are samech, samech. That's sus, and sus is horse. Is it coincidence that all 3 of these words concern the horse? I don't think so. Because what does the song of Moshe say? I will sing unto the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously, the horse and the rider thrown into the sea. He has led them from Ramesses, the thundering horses of pride. He has broken the strength of the Egyptians. He has broken their household gods, their idols. And he has thrown them into the sea of the nations, and they washed up on the beach. He has thrown them into the sea. And I also wrote down here the word chamor, which is jackass, the male donkey. But I believe that is significant because he will take you from strongholds of pride in Egypt at Passover. He will let you cross over. He will lead you through the baptism, the immersion, and when you come out on the other side, you have had a very strong victory, and he might let you camp a little while at Sukkot in order to just give you a foretaste, like a temporary covering. At Sukkot, we've got a temporary covering, and a lot of times with babies, he does that. You know, that you can't get a newborn in trouble. They've just got too much grace, right? And we're the same way. Somebody that's just saved, you can't do anything with them. They're just covered, and they've got this little grace period. It's like he builds a little sukkah over them and protects them for a little while until they've had a chance to get a clear vision of Shavuot and move on. And that's when they'll start being refined. He'll take that covering off, and they'll just start getting slammed. But that's how you grow up. You learn by your mistakes. But he says, you know, I just don't think they're strong enough for war. I'll take them to Sukkot first. Now, they go from a horse, or Ramesses, the thundering horse, to a donkey. How is that? Well, if you look in Zechariah chapter 9, I'm going to show you that the donkey will always be associated with Sukkot. Whether you're looking at a manger idol with baby Jesus in swaddling clothes, or whether you're actually looking at the Messiah himself riding into Jerusalem on a donkey. In Zechariah chapter 9, verses 8 through 10, what we're going to have is a glimpse. We're going to be able to lift up our eyes for just a second, and we're going to be able to glimpse into Sukkot, into the Messianic kingdom. Remember, it's a house that he builds for us. In verse 8, he says, and I shall encamp around my house against an army, against him who passes by and him who returns, so that no oppressor passes through them again. For now I have seen with my eyes, my prophetic eyes. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. See, your sovereign is coming to you. He is righteous and endowed with deliverance, humble and riding on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey. And I shall cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off. And he shall speak peace to the nations, and his rule is from sea to sea, from the river to the ends of the earth. So he's got to cut your horses off before you can really enjoy Sukkot. He's going to take you off your high horse. He's going to put you on a donkey. Because our King himself rode into Jerusalem on a donkey in humility. You have to enter the kingdom in humility as a little child. And he says, at that time in my Messianic kingdom, at my Sukkot, I'm going to cut off the horses from Jerusalem. Nobody will be on their high horse. In John 12, we can see that this is fulfilled. There is a reception for Yeshua at Pesach. John 12, verses 12 through 15. Now remember, it's Passover. See if this sounds like Passover to you, if it sounds like Sukkot. On the next day, a great crowd who had come to the festival, when they heard that Yeshua was coming to Jerusalem, took the branches of palm trees and went out to meet him and were crying out, Hoshiana, blessed is he who is coming in the name of Yahweh, the sovereign of Israel. And Yeshua, having found a young donkey, sat on it, as it has been written, Do not fear, daughter of Sion. See, your sovereign is coming, sitting on the colt of a donkey. At first, his taught ones did not understand this. Well, I don't think we're much different. We can't claim to be any smarter than they were, because they're looking for Sukkot with a great king, but they're not considering the word that says this great king will enter Sukkot riding on a donkey, because he does, after all, declare the end from the beginning. He declares Sukkot from Passover. He is the completion of the cycle. So he comes in riding Chamor, the donkey, into Jerusalem. He's giving them a foretaste of the Sukkot to come. Of course, that didn't last very long, did it? Now, over in Matthew, I'll show you another case where Shavuot was circumvented, and the disciples thought maybe we should be celebrating Sukkot. In Matthew 17, it's a very mysterious passage. Matthew 17, verses 1 through 8. And I'll go slow so I can kind of explain the symbols. You'll see them, I think. And after 6 days, remember you have 6 days to labor and to do all your work, and then you rest in the Shabbat, the creation of Elohim, on the 7th day. So if you lift your eyes, you can see that what Yeshua has done is he has taken them to the end of man's work, and he has allowed them to step over into the 7th day to cross a dimension of time. And what they have stepped into is the millennium, the Messianic kingdom, the Sukkot, the day that is all Shabbat. Kepha, Yaakov, and Yochanan, his brother, and brought them up on a high mountain by themselves. And he was transformed before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his garments became as white as the light. You see, a transformation had taken place in Yeshua by the 7th day. And we're kind of moving in and out of time here. But for right now, look into the millennium and you can see what the disciples saw, because that's where he took them. And even though they had not seen him crucified and resurrected yet, they were seeing him in a future time period transformed into that body, that glorified, resurrected, transfigured body, bathed in light. And what else they see is Moshe and Eliyahu appearing to them, talking with him. It doesn't mean they're like conversing with him back and forth. It means they're with him. They're speaking the same thing. It's like if you're with me, you're side by side and we're going in the same direction. They were with him, speaking with him. Because why? Because the Torah and the prophets prophesied of him. They spoke with him. They weren't speaking 3 different messages. They were speaking one message. They weren't 3, they were 1. And I can show you that. And Kepha, answering, said to Yeshua, Master, It's good for us to be here. Why was it good for them to be there? They made it to Sukkot. They had made it where we all want to go. We all want to press into the Messianic kingdom and be with Yeshua and be transformed. And there's like, wow, can we really be here? Is it okay? You know, I've never been in the future, but here we are. It's good. I like it here. And you know what? Since it's your kingdom, since it's tabernacles, it's Sukkot, let's build some Sukkot. Let's build a sukkah for you, Yeshua. Let's build a sukkah for Eliyahu and Moshe. But you know what happens? It says, while he was still speaking, see, a bright cloud overshadowed them. And see, a voice came out of the cloud saying, this is my Son, the beloved, in whom I did delight. Hear him. And when the taught ones heard, they fell on their faces and were much afraid. But Yeshua came near and touched them and said, rise, and do not be afraid. And having lifted up their eyes, they got over their fear. They looked back up into the millennium and saw no one but Yeshua only. You see, he's not three. He's one. We speak with him. We are one with him, or we're not there. You're either in him or you're not. If you can lift up your eyes, you can see that. We know that Moshe went back down the mountain and his face is glowing and he's got, you guys will not believe what I just saw. And they couldn't because they had not been transformed. His face, he had seen something. He had traveled into the future, stood there and talked with Yeshua and a man not even born yet, Eliyahu, and he got to see the end from the beginning. Eliyahu did the same thing. Remember, he disappeared. Where did he go? Back to the future. He went and he talked and he spoke with, in union with, echad with Yeshua. He could see that the words he was speaking and being persecuted for, it was worth every ounce of flesh that he had to give up. As he was chased here and fed by ravens and and you think, Lord, is it worth it? I'm getting chased. Nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. I'm going to eat some worms. We get into self-pity. But if you will lift your eyes, he will give you just a glimpse into the millennial kingdom, and you can speak with him and see that these words that you're being persecuted for are the words that you speak with him. And if he was persecuted, then by all means, you can expect to be persecuted and ridiculed. The last passage I really want to look at is John 7. And all it is an acknowledgement by Yeshua that there's a time for everything. There is a course of time that has been set apart by the Father. And we need to be really careful. What we say has been done away with, or the things that we think we can reset the course on, that, well, just because I don't want to deal with Shavuot, I'm going to travel around Sukkot. Through the blood of Jesus, when I die, I'm going to go to heaven and be with Jesus. Okay, but didn't you circumvent? One of his commandments was to tarry in Jerusalem until power has come upon you. Because when that power comes upon you, you're not going to be guessing whether that flesh is being refined. You will have no doubt that the flesh has been burned up and is being burned up. And that part of you that is not talking and speaking with the Word of God is being consumed daily. Nevertheless, the purified part of you is walking around daily on fire. And the world is benefiting from it. In John chapter 7, we'll read verses 1 through 10. And after this, Yeshua was walking in the Galilee. Remember, it's Galilee of the nations. For he did not wish to walk in Yehuda, because the Yehudim were seeking to kill him. And the festival of the Yehudim was near, the festival of booths. So his brothers said to him, get away from here and go into Yehuda so that your taught ones also can see the works that you are doing. Now, who needs a family that's trying to get you killed? His brothers did not have faith in his words, and they're like, Quit hiding up here in the nations. Quit hiding up here in Galilee. Go down there where they're trying to kill you and do it. For no one acts in secret, while he himself seeks to be known openly. If you do these works, show yourself to the world. For even his brothers did not believe in him. Yeshua therefore said to them, my time has not yet come, but your time is always ready. Aren't we always ready with our own time? Don't we always have the answer? We need to do this now. No, we don't need to do that yet. We're always changing the times and the seasons to suit us. And his brothers were saying, go ahead. He says, you don't understand my time. My time's not yet been fulfilled. It is impossible for the world to hate you, but it hates me because I bear witness of it that its works are wicked. You see, when you speak with him like Moshe and Eliyahu, you will be confronting not the heathen, you will be confronting believers, at least nominal believers, little Passover lambs, little Rachels. You'll be confronting them with their wickedness. And they'll be trying to send you in there to get killed because they cannot just hate you if you're not speaking the word, but they will hate you if you speak the word that confronts them and makes them decide whether or not to allow that piece of their flesh to be burned up. That's what they hate, when you confront their wickedness. He says, you go up to this festival. I am not yet going up to this festival, for my time has not yet been filled. Not yet been filled. And having said this to them, he stayed in Galilee. You see, he came to us twice, or he will come twice. He came to us the first time almost like a secret, because his own brothers didn't recognize him. And the ones that did were swallowed up eventually. So it's almost been a secret who he is to the Yehudim, because he has not really done his works before them openly. It's been kind of concealed in the nations because we've made little images of him that don't look anything like who he is. We have made Sukkot into an idol, a little graven image of Yeshua. We have made Shavuot into a whole dominion of Pentecostal churches where the glory has departed. Some of them, the glory is still there. Many of them, the glory has departed. It doesn't look anything like the Holy Spirit that Yeshua sent to us to empower us to go to the nations. They sing the same songs every Sunday, and there's no glory. They're not going to the nations, that's for sure. You see, he wasn't telling his brothers not to keep Sukkot. That wasn't the message at all. He wasn't saying that it was okay for him not to keep it. He's saying you don't understand the time. You're not going to really see me in my fullness this time. When I return, then my brothers will see me openly. They will look on me, and then they will understand that I had to come in on a donkey the first time, and they didn't quite recognize that, even though I gave them the symbol in the word. I gave them a clue I would be coming in on a donkey, because their expectation was something different. They didn't really recognize me. I've kind of been a secret to them. But when he comes back, their unbelief will be belief. His brothers will recognize him. And it is at the beginning of this Sukkot that actually merges into Passover that he offers the sacrifice of his flesh. So he's not going to ask us to sacrifice our flesh if he would not be willing to do the same thing. He had to do it too, except his was without sin. There was nothing that could be burned up. Imagine that. He was so perfect, there was absolutely nothing in the fires of hell that could consume him. There was nothing in the fires that come out of the mouth of God, the consuming fire, that could ever devour him, because there was no sinful flesh to burn up. But he's saying, you still got some in you. And I came so that you would understand at the Feast of First Fruits of the ground, at Sukkot, you must arrive without the sinful flesh. You're going to have to take care of it between Passover and Shavuot. And at Shavuot, get ready, it gets tougher. Because you're the first fruits of the wheat now. You're prime choice stuff. And you know what? If you still got chaff on the wheat, I'm going to have to burn the chaff up out of the wheat too. So I'm going to separate that husk, that outer shell, because it's just fit for the fire. And I'm going to take another layer off of you. Because you're not poor man's bread now, you're a rich man's bread. You're primo stuff. But it's going to hurt too, between Shavuot and Sukkot. But the thing that hurt the most was your original decision to go ahead and let it be burned up. Whatever it was, you said, I'm willing to walk, I'm willing to mature. Whatever it is of myself, of my flesh, I'm willing to give it up. And then you're going to have little battles along the way. But they're never as painful as the first one that says, I'm willing to go beyond the blood that's on the doorpost and follow him wherever he leads, no matter what it costs me. If I arrive without sinful flesh, that's the way I want to arrive. Let it go. It's a free will offering. See, if you've never traveled forward, you might be that guilt offering at Shavuot. If that's where you die, is somewhere in the middle, and you've never given up those strongholds, you're still going to have some pain to deal with when the books are open, because that flesh can't enter in. You're going to have to be that one that walks through the fire without being devoured. You might die in infancy at Passover. That would be a tragedy. That would be a real tragedy. But we're going to have to tarry at Shavuot. Make an acknowledgement that I'm entering a very scary part of the journey. Because when I went from the first day to the second day, like I said, the big decision was at the beginning that I'm going to get past Passover. But once I get to Shavuot, I've got to go to the nations. See, where before it was me and my household, now it's me and the nations. And I might be pulled away from my family. I might be pulled into the temple. The fire might rain down on me, and then I might be empowered to go out and speak to people walking in that fire. And that's a very lonely feeling, because your family may not go with you. They'll only go with you so far.
If you'd like a copy of this program, or are interested in starting your own Messianic congregation, please write to the Olive Branch, Highway 80 East at Sally's Branch Road, London, Kentucky 40744, or phone us at 606-862-0878, or visit our website at theolivebranchonline.com.